not the super expert, but I think that we are recording now. And so by way of introduction, Kristin Hiemstra is joining us again from the Art of Potential. And Kristin and I were just discussing one of the courses that she does. She has many courses at NC State and other higher institutions of learning. And today she's diving in with us on EQ, or emotional intelligence in the workplace, and how it can affect us both as team members and also as leaders. And in the work that we do, and especially with regards to the pilot, our mental health and our teamwork in the workplace during the stressful and world-changing work that we do is really important to be able to be happy and productive in getting things done. So I think this message is great for the times that we're in, as well as the Friday that we're on at the end of the year, when we are making sort of last-minute adjustments for this year and figuring out how we're going to live our lives next year so that we can maintain a little bit of sanity in the midst of all of this whirling craziness. So thank you so much, Kristin, for joining us today. And I'm just going to turn it over to you. And if you want to say, a few words about sort of your background with this particular issue by way of introduction, that might be helpful for folks as well.
Sure. So again, my name is Kristin Hiemstra, and my company is Art of Potential. And I work with organizations to help them, and individuals, kind of help them to stay aligned with what they want and to do so in the most positive way possible. So I started this work actually pretty early on. I went to UNC with Susan, studied anthropology. So it was there that I really got a taste for culture and how culture plays out in all different facets of life. My area of interest in particular was rites of passage, because every culture has them, and they're so interesting to me about, what it means. A rite of passage is when you start in as defined one way and then you end defined another way. And so a driver's license would be an example. You start unable to drive and then you end having that new power. The emotional intelligence is one of those powers that you want to have in the workplace, because emotions are something that define how we move forward. How we feel about something actually overrides our intellect. It overrides everything. So having the ability to control how you feel about things and to realize that this is a very powerful asset you possess is really what this emotional intelligence work in the workplace is about for me. Because I have worked in nonprofits for a significant portion of my life. I've dealt with the stress of the funding. I was a grant writer. I've also done some organization. I've seen a lot of the different hats and the stress involved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a combination of theory and practice, because I want you to have tools that you can use every single day to keep your emotional intelligence and your emotional mood basically high and productive, and to be able to release some of the stress and anxiety around. So that's my goal. If there are any questions, feel free to ask them. I hope that there will be, because, it just makes for a really fun conversation. So one of the things that I like to start with is identifying the characteristics of the best boss and the worst boss. At this point in most of our careers, we've had the experience of working with different personalities. And as those tend to play out, you naturally have kind of a sifting and sorting thing going on of, ooh, I like this characteristic of this boss. I don't like this. I like this. I like that. And in a class environment, hands immediately shoot up because everybody has opinions about this particular topic. So let me just, Susan, let me bounce this off of you. Can you give me 3 characteristics of some of the best bosses you've worked for and 3 of some of the worst ones?
Sure. So for best boss, I'm going to say funny and trusting and hardworking, although that can be kind of a double sword. But,
Yeah.
I'm hardworking, so I don't like it when my boss is not hardworking. And then on the worst boss, I'm going to say duplicitous, which is, saying one thing and thinking another, and not hardworking. And let's see, another one there, worst boss. It's that insecure. I don't like that.
because that can lead to a lot of other things, right? Just so one of the things that I like to do with this exercise is to have, so the way that I believe is that everything starts within the individual and then comes out. So wherever you are internally, you're going to project out into the world. That's just the way that it is. So one of the things that's super important is to pay attention to the voice inside your head, which also is kind of like your own voice boss. Now, some things that characteristics that people will bring up are things like controlling, duplicitous, not taking responsibility, not giving credit where credit is due. The list goes on, and everybody has those, right? And the characteristics of the best boss are a lot like what Susan said, as well as supportive and forgiving and inclusive. And you'll find these wonderful words. But what I want people to take away from this is that we're talking about bosses as though they're external, but the boss voice I really want to connect with is the one inside. Because what I find is a lot of people are so wonderful to people outside of themselves, whether it's a friend or a colleague or somebody else. They just, so many of you are wonderful friends. You have super strong values. I mean, you're just the kind of people everybody would want in their lives. But when it comes to you talking to yourself, it's like this whole other person emerges. And I'm not saying this for everybody, but I find it a lot. It's somebody who's condemning. It's somebody who's judgmental. It's somebody who is nasty and says mean things. And it's like, will say things like, you are stupid, or that was so dumb, or, oh my gosh, I can't believe what an idiot you are. And this internal voice is the one that through the emotional intelligence process is really a big part of what I'm targeting. Because I know that if we can get that voice to be kinder, gentler, and happier, that actually you will be kinder, gentler, and happier is what it comes down to. So that's a big part of this process that I just want to be very transparent about at the beginning. A little bit about me is I have a master's degree in counseling, and then I also have a coaching certification. So when I was in DC, I got a master's degree in counseling at George Mason University, and my coaching certification is through a company called IPEC, which happens to be a really big coaching organization. So, okay, so what I want people to do is to get some type of a description of what emotional intelligence is. And I'm going to kind of go through these quickly because I have a lot of slides and we're going to be wrapping up here in about a half hour. So I'm going to go kind of fast here. But emotional intelligence, there's tons of definitions of it, but this is the one that I like best. It's the ability to accurately perceive your own, and it's interesting because I can't see the whole screen because I have pictures up. But your own emotions and to manage your own and others' emotions. So the ability to accurately perceive your own and others' emotions and to manage your own and others' emotions. So in order for you to manage something, you have to know what it is. Emotions can be super tricky because when we perceive ourselves as a good person, we don't like to have negative emotions. We don't like to feel snarky. We don't like to feel duplicitous. We don't like to feel spiteful. But yet, those are all actually things all of us feel. And so we're going to be talking about that, and it's okay. It's just you need to be able to identify it so then you can transmute whatever that is into something positive. I'm very into transmutation. So then we have, I want you to know why this is important, because I'm a big person in the why. Like if I don't know why it's important, I'm not going to pay attention. So noticing, it's the practice of noticing and paying attention to your emotions, giving them significance. It's the ability to influence your ability and others to succeed when you're in an environment where emotions run high. So that's a super important part. It's fun because you'll see some people who are really good with emotional intelligence. They have this street smart where they can just kind of pick up on things and they notice things other people don't. They notice relationships and connections. They notice opportunities that other people don't. And having good emotional intelligence can help with a lot of that. And it's one of these things that, so we hear a lot about IQ and how smart are you and whatever. some of that is determined genetically, whereas emotional intelligence is something that you can grow. And it's something that is within your purview, that if you want to grow it, it is there to be grown. And one thing I want to just mention briefly is sometimes people associate extroverts with having more emotional intelligence. This is not that. This is something completely different. And I say that because everybody knows someone who is super extroverted who is a social disaster. Like, you know, somebody you would, like, you just loathe when you see at a party because they're like, oh my God, how are you? Whatever, you know, they just, you want to run away, but yet they're very extroverted. So emotional intelligence and extroversion, not the same thing. So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind as we go through. So there's a lot of studies on how this works. And if you are in an organization working with other people, whether you're in a for-profit or a nonprofit environment, you will inevitably come across, because your emotions are your energy, you're going to be coming across some of these things. So when somebody doesn't have emotional intelligence, you find out that performance declines. Because you're around somebody who's moody, who doesn't have control over their emotions. They may be rude. They may be subject to outbursts. What happens? People avoid them. Absolutely. What you won't ask questions. You'll avoid doing any projects that involve them. That's natural. It is completely natural to avoid people with low emotional intelligence, because who wants that in your life, right? Sometimes you can't, but seriously, if you have the choice, you're going to avoid. So you're going to see a decline in productivity. You're going to find that people who have low emotional intelligence, people are going to lose time at work, finding ways, honestly, to avoid them. And you're going to find a lot of, you know, time wasted that way. And you'll have people, I'll just kind of skip over these, but you're going to have you're going to have higher, more people resigning, or you're going to have a higher turnover rate if you have somebody in charge with low emotional intelligence, because people just don't want it, even if they like the job. So there are three things you want to like in an organization. One is the actual work you do. One is the culture of the organization, which is essentially how the values are aligned. And then one is your supervisor. And so if you match all those things together, if you hit them all, it's a trifecta. But a supervisor, you'll hear people say, people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. And this is part of the reason why they have emotional intelligence. That is, they don't have great emotional intelligence, so people are running away because they don't want to be around that. So just to kind of touch on these, you're going to see in this case, like I said, I was teaching MBA students, but sales also applies to nonprofits, greater fundraising, however you want to look at it. You're going to see more money coming in because people have more confidence when somebody has that ability. You see greater productivity, the ability and more stability, higher workplace satisfaction, better customer service, all these things. And you're going to see that more with people who have greater emotional intelligence. So this is the part I really want to get into. I wanted to give you a little bit of the theory first, but now let's talk about why it's critical in developing it both in yourself and in your organization. It allows for better decision making. And we all have been a part of organizations and societies where people's emotions are running high and really bad decisions are made. Being able to balance that and being impartial or having emotional stability, it makes everything better. So when you see this, the IQ kind of up here, it's actually being driven by the EQ. There are brilliant people who are completely irrational because their emotions are irrational. So you really want to stabilize this. And the things that we're going to be working on during this: self-awareness, motivation, self-management, social skills, and empathy. So we're going to get kind of into these. So again, we talked about why a lot of your organizations are national. They may be going global. Some of them are local. Your teamwork will improve. Your service to your clients, your stakeholders will be better. It's just an important thing to have. So these are kind of where emotional intelligence started. And with any big movement, you have several generations of it. my opinion, one of the people who's also big in this space who isn't managed is a guy named Abraham Maslow. And he had the hierarchy of needs. And in his hierarchy, if you look at where the emotional needs, they're not in the basic needs, which are like water and shelter and kind of things, but they're about the third level up. And so you need to feel emotionally stable for you to be able to move into your highest level of productivity. So, but these are technically the guys who, you know, came up with emotional intelligence and all that stuff that's turned to it. But then there's one guy who like took this and like took off. His name is Daniel Goleman. So if you have been to anything attached to emotional intelligence, if you don't know his name, they're going to be like, why were you talking about emotional intelligence without Daniel Goleman? So he wrote this big bestseller. This happened in the 90s, and from there he kind of moved forward. But I do want you to know that. So if you tell anyone you know about emotional intelligence and they say, oh, Daniel Goleman, you can shake your head like you know something. If you really want to read the book, go right ahead. I'm going to give you kind of some of the concepts after it. But this has been this guy stuff. If you read these books, you'll find that they're kind of redundant because emotional intelligence is just intelligence about emotion. I don't want to discourage you. I'm just letting you know. So you have 4 domains, and the domains and competencies are all interrelated. The self-awareness is going to translate into social awareness, and this is where we'll spend the bulk of our time. Self-awareness to social awareness, because what happens inside is going to happen outside. It's going to be a projection. Your ability to manage yourself and your own reactions is actually going to have a huge impact on how you manage relationships and teams. So you want these, and they're all cyclical, right? They all are tied together. So you want to get really keen on all 4 of these quadrants. These are the big rocks in emotional intelligence. This is where all that happens is. And then you can see kind of how these things play out, right? So when you have high self-awareness, you have a 38% chance of being more socially aware. And when you have high self-awareness, you're just a lot more likely to be able to demonstrate self-management. And if you don't, and often kids are a great way to see this, when they get mad, they'll just yell, right? They don't necessarily think, well, why am I angry? Is this a reasonable response to this stimulus? No. And you see a lot of memes on that on social media. So I want to talk about self-awareness because one of the things we know for a fact, and we've seen in research, is that people who are not good at identifying their emotions and who don't have language to put around it are often, well, this is not the best way to say this, but if you look at people who are locked up or incarcerated, they often don't have a lot of words to put around their feelings. So in other words, instead of, they'll go from mad to rage, but they may not have all the nuanced feelings in between. And I always found that super interesting because as you teach people words, they have a different ability to think about things because your ability to think is very much tied to your vocabulary and the words you use to describe things. So in my class, what we do is, hold on just a minute. I need to check something. Someone just knocked on the door. But look at those words. Hey, I ordered a clock, and it says that it was hand delivered, and I never got it. It said it was that on Monday. Yeah.
I was off Monday.
Okay.
I wasn't here Monday. Delivered on it.
Yeah. What is that? That's what the tracking said.
You never got it.
Good that we paused on such a meaty slide. I'm actually jotting these down, not all the words, but embarrassed happy.
www.usps.com. I
They're interesting categories.
So we received it. I would go online. It's better to go online than on the phone. Go online and then inquire about it. Give them the tracking number, and they should be able to investigate it. And they'll probably have to resend it. I don't recall it.
That's fine. I'm sorry, I'm on the phone call, so I'm gonna go get that. But
Sure.
Thank you so much for checking in. I appreciate it. Okay, sorry about that. The U.S. Postal Service and I had a miscommunication and I did not get a package. But
No
what
problem.
I do in this exercise is I have people, the students, automatically pick a word and it's randomly assigned. So they don't get a choice in the word that they pick. However, what they have to do is find one of these emotions and apply it. So it's really interesting because they come up with amazing examples. And it could be, I'm depressed because I thought something was going to work out a certain way and it didn't work out this way. I feel victimized because I'll use they said the U.S. Postal Service said that I got a package which I did not get. I feel inferior, I feel lonely, pessimistic, all these things. And I move them up the continuum, again, kind of randomly assigned, because the point is that we all have access to these emotions at any time. And that's super important to remember because people don't think of themselves as having the fluidity and the freeness to choose their emotion. And this exercise really hammers that home. And for emotional intelligence, it's very important to realize that at any given moment, you can choose what emotion you want to bring to a situation. And we had some really interesting examples. We had a feedback session where people were given 3 positives and 3 areas of growth. The people from the United States did not volunteer for the most part. They were like, no, I don't want to know my areas or 3 critiques. You know, give me the positives, but not the critiques. The people we had from other countries were volunteering because in their culture, getting critiqued is so important and so valued. So the way that we feel about things can be driven from our culture and our personal experience. But it's important, the important piece to know is that you get to choose. And as long as if you walk away with nothing else from this, know that you get to choose the emotions you're bringing into your day, even though the world could be falling apart. All hell could be breaking loose. The organization could have problems. The world can have problems, all that kind of stuff. But you get to show up how you choose. So that's really what we're going to be doing with this. So one of the things that's super important is to figure out how you're appraising things. And I bring up a book here. It's called From Emotional Intelligence at Work. It's not a super popular book. It doesn't have a lot of stars. Buy it on Amazon. But I find it useful because it has so many exercises and so many ways of being able to practice and work with this. So it's almost like tools for sculpting, right? Because with emotions, you're sculpting. And this has so many exercises so you can do that. So one of the strategies about how you determine or you appraise your own emotions is to figure out what's generating them. Like, where are they coming from? Because if you don't know why you're feeling a certain way, you're not going to be able to change it. And that can get kind of wonky because sometimes you have to dig kind of deep. For instance, you may be bitter that a colleague is taking the lead on a project. And you may feel like, oh, well, I hope that project fails because I think it's a stupid project. But then if you unpeel the layers, it may be because you didn't get selected to lead the project. And so while that sounds petty, it's also real. And we're not perfect. But once you identify that and be like, well, actually, I think I'm upset because I wasn't picked. Now you can actually neutralize it a little bit. And you can be like, okay, it actually is a pretty decent project. And I don't want to feel this way, or I'm not going to choose to feel this way. I'm going to choose to get behind the project. It's up to you how you want to do it, but the message I want to give is figure out where your emotions are coming from. I don't care if they're reasonable. I tell them I don't care if it's reasonable or unreasonable. It's how you feel. So just admit how you feel and then decide to do with it. Don't try to sugarcoat anything. Your senses are so useful in figuring this out. Because if your heart starts racing, you've got some adrenaline going. Let's figure out where that's coming from. Some people feel aggressive when there are challenges. What's that about? Why are you moving into fight or flight? And you know, think about what you're seeing or what you're hearing, and use your senses, because they're so much a part of how we gather information. Use them when making your approval or your appraisal, excuse me. And look at your intentions. So intentions are so interesting. They're good and bad, right? Somebody can totally screw some up and have the best intention. And when that happens, most people look at them like, yeah, you meant well, but yeah, it's still a disaster, but you meant well. So we're going to kind of smooth over that. Get in touch with your own intentions. Figure out what it is you're bringing to the table. And then if you like your intention, stay with it. Just completely stay with it. Even if all hell breaks loose, know that what you came to the table and bringing was authentic, and it was real, and it was positive and fabulous. If you look at your intention and you're like, you know what, it needs to be tweaked, then tweak it. And then the final thing is that is so helpful and so useful and also a little scary, is to pull back and look at yourself arbitrarily. Look at yourself without judgment, the way a camera would. Because a camera is going to capture everything, right? A camera is going to see, but it's going to capture the words coming out of your mouth, even if it can't capture your thoughts. That is a fabulous way to get in touch with your thoughts. That is a fabulous way for you to be able to say, look what came out of my mouth. They were either incongruent or they were very congruent. And the camera won't lie. So like one of the things Susan was saying, a hardworking boss, a boss that doesn't work hard. If you look at your camera and you're working really hard, and you look at another person's and you're like, no, they're not, you've got some conflict there. So pay attention, because you will also find, I'm not saying this is Susan at all, but you'll find some people who are like, oh yeah, I work really hard. And then the camera is like them on Facebook and them on Twitter and them on Instagram, and some Snapchatting goes on, and oh, it's time for lunch. So just kind of pay attention to that. That can happen too. All right. So we kind of went through this, right? Okay. So what happens when your self-awareness improves and when your ability to read your own emotions improves? You get this, it's kind of like a magic power you get, for a lack of a better way to describe it. You become suddenly super accurate at pinpointing things, because people's emotions actually are kind of similar. So if you feel bitter about X, Y, and Z, chances are when you see somebody acting a certain way, you'll be able to pinpoint and say, you know what? I felt bitter about this. I bet they're feeling bitter about this. So that's why it's so important to be honest about your emotions. Because of that, your ability to communicate improves, as does your self-confidence, because you become better at reading situations. There are a lot of bosses out there that a lot of people in my classes wanted to take these courses because they were seeing an incongruence, like they weren't aware of their own emotions. And so when they were reacting to things, they weren't reacting in an appropriate way because there was no awareness going on. They were just kind of intellectually. You can react intellectually. Of course, you have to, right? Because you're a thinking being. But the emotional reaction actually is kind of like, if you think of foundation, like we saw with the iceberg, the emotional reaction's actually going to drive the intellectual reaction. So there are some great online assessments that I would encourage you. They're free. So Harvard Business Review has something on emotional intelligence that you can take, and it just kind of tells you where you are in the scale. And it can tell you, you know, how is your self-awareness? You know, do an assessment, figure it out. And you're basically, your goal is to see yourself as others see you. And that's why the camera is so important. So where that kind of moves us then to is self-management, because once you know what you're capable of, you also then know what you need to manage. And self-management, whole different but similar ballgame, right? It allows you to control. Now that you know, you've named it, you get to control it. If you've ever been to a Little League game or you've had your children involved in sports, you will see a lot of people who have no emotional control. You will see parents screaming things at referees while their 5-year-old does things. It's actually probably one of the best ways to see out of control emotional management that you could possibly imagine. Maybe your office is like that. I sincerely hope not. But anyway, The other thing that self-management allows is for transparency, because when you can say to somebody, you know, I wonder if you're feeling this way. One, you help give them words to describe their feelings, because sometimes they simply don't have them, but also it allows you to be transparent about what you think is going on, and they can if they should want to. So you can say to someone, I wonder if you might be feeling a little bit uncomfortable because this project wasn't given to you and now you have to work for this person that you don't really want, or whatever your situation is. But if you can put that into words, it allows for transparency in conversations. When you have that, greater adaptability ensues, right? Because now you know what you're dealing with, so you can choose how you're going to deal with it, which is really what adaptability is about. You can move into achievement. When it's interesting, when things feel transparent, there's a sense of trust, because it doesn't feel like anything's being hidden or duplicitous, as Susan said. So when people have that feeling in their organization, with their supervisors, with people around them, they're more likely to take initiative, and they're more likely to be optimistic about the outcome, because they feel like they're going to get treated well. It doesn't mean that everything's going to come up roses, but it means that they're going to be treated fairly, because somebody's looked at their intentions, which we talked about on the last slide, as opposed to looking at things from a different lens. So that's so powerful stuff. And we know from research, because it was actually a physicist that did some research to figure out where communication flowed. And communication flows, you wouldn't think in it. So if you're looking at a hierarchy, right, you'd think it would go from, you know, the director to the executive director to the assistant director to the whatever, you know, you'd assume that it'd be kind of linear. It is not at all. Communication goes from like the director to the secretary, then the secretary tells somebody over here to over here, and it's just fascinating. But what you find out, or what this physicist found out, is that she was looking at it as an energy cycle. There are some people in an organization who are trusted to give information to, who are also disseminators, because of the way that they're saying things or the way that they're presenting things. Information naturally flows to them, and then it flows around the organization based on who is connected and has a good relationship with who. So if you're not connected in your organization, there may be a strong possibility you ain't getting the information that you need. That's kind of not the official word, but kind of the unofficial word. Anyway, just something to keep in mind. So what we're looking for as we develop self-management is emotional control. Like everybody has disruptive emotions. Everybody does. So when you have them, let go of any judgment, but be like, okay, this is not going to get me where I want to go. So I need to somehow harness it. And sometimes it's harnessing energy, right? And move that into a constructive way. And we talked about all these others, the transparency, adaptability, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so this is like big stuff here, but we're gonna just kind of gently get in here. When you take control of your emotions, you want to gently do it. So you're not gonna be able to go from, I got fired and I feel great. Now somebody may be able to do that, but most people, they're not gonna be able to make that leap. There are things that all of us have within ourselves that are so hot, we can't even touch them. The example that one of the students brought up is that he came from an Indian family with a lot of successful business people. All his cousins were successful, his parents were successful. He started a restaurant and it failed. So for him, it was just such a sense of shame and embarrassment that he really couldn't even talk about it. So you're not going to look at him and go, well, here, you can just feel better about it. Just control your emotions. That's not going to happen. What you want to do is you want to, for yourself and for other people, give them really gentle sloping steps to something new. It doesn't have to be to feeling good. It can just be to being neutral. It can just be to feeling less bad. So this is a really important technique. So let's say that we'll just go with you've been fired and you're angry about it. You're really, really angry. So, okay. So, and you're embarrassed, angry and embarrassed. So another way to look at that would be And if anyone wants to jump in, feel free, because this is a really interesting class discussion. I had a learning experience, and I learned that I do not like that kind of work, or I do not excel in that kind of environment. And that's a neutral statement, but it just raises the emotion from being so hot to being just a little less. And then you want to take it up another notch when you're ready and be like, okay, because I learned what I don't like, I actually have greater clarity around what I do like. Oh, okay, so now we've just kind of gone up a couple notches, and now it's not so hot that you can't talk about it. You have other words to talk about it. And I just want to bring this up. In any situation when you job hunt, if you have to say why you left an organization, there may be 10 reasons. You are going to pick the reason that's going to make you look best, right? There may be 10 reasons you got fired. Glom onto the one that's going to make you feel best. Doesn't mean that you don't need to go and reflect on what happened, but it does mean that you need to give yourself one of those other truths, because there's no like one distilled truth in the world, right? There's always a bunch, and be able to pull that one through, because that one's going to take you further and get you feeling better faster. So then let's say that you go and you say, okay, well, I got fired and it helped to clarify what I like. Then you can take that one step further and say, I have pretty good clarity around the things that I like, and I like X, Y, and Z. So now we've taken kind of the shame and embarrassment of getting fired, and I think of it like a ball of sun. Like if you think of just a ball of sun, it can burn, right? I don't know that people know that if you put a what's it called? You put a looking glass basically under a sun, you can turn it into a laser. And that can burn pretty much everything. But if you pull it out and you give it what I call rays, like you take the rays of how you're feeling and move it around, it can actually illuminate, and it can be kind of warm when you go into it, and you can illuminate some of the things that are going on because you pulled it out and it doesn't feel as concentrated or as hot anymore. So it's just such a powerful, powerful way of taking control of some of your thoughts. Now, the other thing is the inner dialogue. So we kind of got, these things are very related. I have them out as distinctions, but they're really not. And the inner dialogue is how you're going to talk to yourself during this process. So you can say things like, all is well, I'm on my path, I know what everything's going to work out for me. When you start repeating messages like that, consciously and unconsciously, you are sending a message to yourself of what you want your outcome to be. And you're generating positive energy toward it, which is what the goal is, right? We want you to be in a positive, optimistic place. So when you start using that language as close as you can that's comfortable to you, then you start taking control of that voice inside your head. That voice also will translate to other people. So when somebody else has a setback, you can look at them and say, you know what? I've noticed there's a lot of things, I know this was a setback, but I also see a lot of things working out for you. Like, can we talk about those a minute? So you can also help other people kind of pull apart their emotional fragileness sometimes in a productive way. The other method that I use a lot, and I've worked with, suicidal teenagers, stressed out corporate executives, just kind of a whole range of people, is to put it on a scale. And I use this, so I had a situation where when I was having my first child, I was in the hospital in Fairfax County for a long, long period of time. And I was hospitalized because I had preterm labor. So in order for me to kind of keep my mind, I would scale it. And I would say, okay, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being like the worst things in the world are happening to me, I'm being tortured, and I would make up just the grimmest, most horrible things you can ever imagine. And 10 being like I'm running through a field of wildflowers and everything's perfect. Where am I on that scale? And what that would help to do was to manage my reaction to the stimulus. I was in a hospital, one of the best hospitals in the world. I was being taken care of by a whole team. It kind of sucked, but on the other hand, it could have been so much worse. And so when I would do that, it would allow me space to kind of be safe for a minute. And sometimes that's all a scale will do. It will allow you to kind of be in a safe spot, or allow you to understand, how bad is this really? How bad is it that we didn't get that grant? How bad is it that whatever? Okay, and then you can be like, well, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to get tortured. The sun will rise tomorrow. Like, so you know, you can kind of scale things out that way. And it's just a wonderful tool to use. It's also a great tool to use with people around you, whether it's children, other adults, whatever. It's great to use with parents who are screaming at the refs in the kid games too. All right, so take control of your behavioral patterns. That means really getting in touch with what your desired outcome is. So some people will fly off the handle about situations and not realize kind of the swath of damage they've left in their wake. So you'll see a boss totally level an employee, and the employee is next out looking for another job. The boss may not want to lose that employee, and they may not realize that what they just did is causing this huge chain reaction. So make sure that it doesn't mean that you shouldn't give negative feedback. It just means to make sure that it is in line with what you want. And in school systems, they know that it's a 3-to-1 ratio. When you're working with someone, you want to give 3 positives for every correction. So preferably sandwich, 2 positives, 1 correction, 1 positive again. And then the other thing that you can do to manage yourself is channel someone. Now, I use Beyonce because she's just brilliant at this. So what you may not know is that, and I talked about a little bit with this, I think, in the spirituality talk, Beyonce sang with a group called Destiny's Child. It was her and 2 other women. They went on stage. They were super popular. And then Beyonce decided to go solo. And she had never been out on stage by herself. So she was really nervous. So she had to come up with a way to change her perception about what was happening. So she decided to create an alter ego. And her alter ego was Sasha Fierce. Her first album is called Sasha Fierce because Sasha could come into that situation and take control of it, whereas Beyonce wanted to be back behind the curtain watching what was going on. But she couldn't do that. She had to get out on the stage. This is a super powerful way if you are in a situation to access power that you have but don't feel connected to. So, and it can work with anyone. Before Donald Trump was in the position he is now, I would use him as an example of somebody who had pure confidence in what they could do. Because if you listen to him, it's like going to be the greatest thing in the world. It's going to be the best thing in the world, whatever. There's some value in that actually in how you think about and talk about things. We're going to do this. It's going to be fabulous. Because it helps to bring that energy into a situation. And so you want to make sure when you look at a situation, whatever it is, your office, the budget, whatever, that you're bringing the energy to it that you want to come out of it. And finding people, sometimes it's a parent, it's a mentor, somebody who can help you get in touch with that. Just such a powerful way to improve your self-management. So, we talked about that. So now let's do a quick talk about social awareness. So we had self-awareness was over here, self-management down here. Now we're moving to social awareness. Self-awareness and social awareness, very, very connected to each other. With self-awareness, we're looking at how do you empathize with someone? And you can't empathize with someone until you can understand where they're coming from. You can't understand where someone is coming from unless you go inside first. Then you can ask questions and you can say, okay, this is how I would feel. I wonder if they would feel that way. And then people will tell you, no, I don't feel that way. That doesn't resonate with me at all. Okay, great. That's not bad. It just means that you need to get clarity around it. So being able to figure out where someone else is coming from was actually one of the ways Lincoln was super successful. It allows you to see things from a different lens, and then it makes it easier to connect so that you can both get the outcome that you want. Organizational awareness, you need to be able to read relationships. Super important to be able to do that and pick up on emotional currents and who actually has power. Who is actually making things happen. I work with an organization right now, which is pretty prominent in my area, and the executive director people just don't give him information. They don't seek out any, thing of importance from him. He does not have a lot of power. It's the people around him who do. And so they're constantly the ones making the decisions, and being able to have that awareness, super, super helpful when you're trying to do anything. And then all these, as you can imagine, are tied to the service orientation. Whether you're serving yourself, in other words, saying, okay, this is what I want to do. These are the things I'm going to need. This is how it may go. Or serving others, being able to anticipate and talk about what somebody needs really puts you very strongly in line with strong emotional intelligence, as well as it's just good practice. Because if your stakeholders aren't getting services they need from you, they're going to go somewhere else if they can. Sometimes they can't. But if you're wanting to grow your organization, you want to be able to make sure your reputation and everything that you do is serving the cohort you're trying to serve. So here are some strategies to increase your social awareness competencies. Put yourself in another person's shoes. So one of the things they teach you that's part of both a counseling and a coaching program is to reflectively listen. And when you reflectively listen, you're basically paraphrasing what somebody tells you, and you're saying it back to them, because you want to make sure, and you've got to use their words. That's super important. Use their words to reflect back to them what you believe they are saying. If somebody says, I feel tired, you don't want to say, well, I just heard you say you felt tired. You want to be like, oh, tell me a little bit more about that. What does tired feel like to you? Get them to elaborate a little bit more about it. When you do this, you are going to open people up, because when you reflectively listen, what you're saying to them is, you can trust me. I'm listening to you. I'm repeating back to you what you're saying to me because I want to understand it better. And when somebody feels like they're getting that, they will just pour their hearts out to you, because they trust that what how you're responding lets them know that their words aren't wasted air. Again, so that's very important. I hope everybody goes and tries that. If you just even make a phone call to somebody who you haven't talked to in a while and just start reflectively listening back what they're saying, they will just open up to you so much. Organizational awareness, we're going to move on to that one. Again, start looking for those relationships. You can see them sometimes in eye contact. People who will sit in a meeting, you'll notice that they're making eye contact. They're looking to the side. They're giving each other subtle information. While you may not like it, it's the way that the world works, and you can kind of start to notice. Start to notice where information is flowing. Ask people where they got their information from, and you'll quickly be able to kind of identify the unspoken hierarchy of communication that's happening in an organization. And then two, service orientation. You can take the scaling method that we talked about, and you can help other people use it. Where are you on the scale? How are you on the scale? How can I help you move on this scale? And I do this, I can't even tell you how many times I do this with my clients who are in high stress situations. How can we move you out of the 8 and move you to a 6? Whatever it takes, because people actually, you always want to respect the fact that people are typically experts on themselves. So while you may have a ton of ideas, and I am one of those who, this is my blind spot, I have a ton of ideas on how to fix things. And I have constantly had to remind myself that people are actually the best experts on themselves. So I should be looking to supplement and encourage what they already know rather than just giving them information. Okay, and then the last piece we want to talk about is relationship management. So you remember we had self-management, now we're moving to relationship management. So once you do this, the self-management piece, the relationship management piece becomes easier. So these are things that seem so obvious, but yet if you haven't had them spelled out, you just naturally don't think about this, right? So the self-management is the things you want from the good boss, right? You want the good boss to worry about developing you, helping you, be the best that you can be. So guess what? Whether you're a boss to yourself or others, that's something you can do. Develop others, help them, give them a wide swath so that when they make mistakes, it's considered part of the experience. It's not a showstopper. You're going to see inspirational leadership here. Know what inspires you, because what inspires you may inspire other people. It may not. But, and you can ask people, what would inspire you? This is a great, actually, conversation to have in your office, because so many of you all are working in places where you're helping people, and you got into the work because you were inspired, because there was something that really connected deeply with the value within you. And then the layers pile on, right? And what the connection isn't quite as clean as it was when you first, the idealism isn't, you know, quite as bright and shiny as it happened to be in the past. And then we have change catalyst, initiating, managing change, influence, are you impacting others, conflict management. So I had a speaker come in on this. One of the things that you need to be good at in conflict management is knowing how to say things and not being afraid of it. And the techniques that she gave were to say something like, so as part of this organization, it is my job to do X, Y, and Z. So that you state why you're looking to do what you want to do. And what I see right now is that you seem to be having a bad day, and you're feeling like you're being rude to everybody or something. You don't want to be quite that direct, but it seems to me you're having a bad day. I've had complaints about you being a little snippy with other people. How can I support you in getting new behavior so that doesn't come again? So not being afraid to have those critical conversations that are best had before the train is, like, you know, barreling down the tracks when it's just leaving, because it's harder to stop, you know, this negative momentum. You know, you're not going to jump in front of it, but if it's easy to stop, go ahead and stop it there. And then teamwork and collaboration. Does everybody know where we're going? You know, a nonprofit, yes, they have a mission statement everyone's tied to, but let's make sure we're working toward the same goals. So those are the types, self-management, and you can see, you know, you can see the parallels between self and relationship management. So here are ways you can develop others. You can act as a mentor. You can give constructive feedback. You can provide support. And you can recognize other strengths. I noticed this. I appreciate this about you. All these things work very well in developing other people. So I went over time. So anyway, that is what we have for this particular process in emotional intelligence. I hope these strategies have been useful to you. I would recommend, if you want to get further into this, finding one strategy and just practicing one at a time. You don't want to overwhelm yourself, but they're really, really good tools to have in your wheelhouse as you go forward with this. So again, the scaling is good, the channeling is good. There's so many really good things that you can do to improve your own emotional intelligence. So Susan, thank you so much. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, no, this was fantastic. I know that there's so much interest in these topics, and nonprofits don't have the budgets or the time to go to professional development workshops all the time. And yet, you know, the work that we do is incredibly stressful in offices. And so how we manage our emotions and are even, like you said, just starting with being aware of what our own emotions are. I mean, these are life skills, not just work skills, but so important for nonprofit folks. So I'm really glad that you were able to share all of this with us. I'm sure the MBA students loved it, because they're like, this is the real deal. This is what we need to know about offices.
What happens every day.
I know. And of course, I love any chart. So the self, others, actions, awareness chart is great as well. Anyway, thank you so much. We're going to record this, and I'll send out the link. And so if other folks get in touch with you, that might be why. Folks who are listening, feel free to get in touch with Kristin. She's super accessible and helpful and loves helping nonprofits. So I'll cut the recording, unless if anyone has any questions and they want to chime in. There's nothing in the chat box. But otherwise, thanks. We didn't go too, it was close to an hour, so I think we're good on time, at least on the recording front. And we really appreciate you. Thank you so much, Kristin.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure, and good luck to all of you out there. You know, keep up the good work, keep it up, and keep your emotions as positive as you possibly can.
Yeah,
It really helps.
especially here in DC, managing the emotions is like a full-time
Yes.
job.
Oh, yes.
But it's great. Also in the chat box, I put this interview with Jill Taylor, who's one of my favorite neuroscientists. That same thing where have you read Stroke of Insight, Kristin? I really recommend it.
No.
Yeah, check out the link that I put in the chat box if you can see it. And the book is super accessible and really short. She's a brain scientist who had a stroke, and she retrained her brain as she recovered to basically be happy whenever she wanted to be by like turning sort of her left brain off and being in that presence of her peaceful right brain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so she talks about the structure of the brain and how it is possible to practice that. And, it's related to this. I didn't know it was so related.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Very much so.
But it's a huge practice and one that I struggle with, practice with.
We all do. We all do.
Anyway, thanks so much. And thanks folks who are listening.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a good one.